Elderly widow eating scraps. What happened next? Shocked all, the wind blew fiercely over the cliffs of the small Viking village, carrying with it the cold scent of the sea. Waves crashed endlessly against jagged rocks below, sending white foam spiraling into the air. The village was quiet, almost too quiet, as if even the seagulls had been silenced by the biting chill. Small wooden houses lined the muddy streets, their roofs weighed down by snow and frost. Smoke rose in thin lines from chimneys, carrying the faint smell of fish and bread, but few villagers were stirring. Ragnar, the giant of the village, walked slowly through the streets. His boots left deep impressions in the snow, and his cloak, heavy and dark, swayed with each step. Even among the other Vikings he was massive, taller and broader than any man alive, with shoulders like carved cliffs and hands that could crush wood with ease. His long, dark hair blew across his face, and his icy blue eyes scanned the village with quiet intensity. Many feared him, and some admired him, but very few truly knew him. He had fought in countless battles, slain enemies far larger than himself, and carried scars not only on his body but on his heart. Today, though, he was not hunting or patrolling. Today his steps were slower, drawn by something he could not name. Perhaps it was boredom, or perhaps it was curiosity, but something in the air called to him. He had heard whispers from the villagers about an elderly widow living at the edge of the forest. A woman who kept to herself and survived on scraps. Most said she was cursed, that her husband had died under mysterious circumstances, and that any who approached her home would invite misfortune. Yet the idea of her drew him, like a quiet flame in the cold darkness. Ragnar rounded a bend in the road and saw her for the first time. She crouched near a heap of discarded vegetables and torn bread, picking through them slowly. Her hair was white as snow, and her hands were thin and worn, but she moved with care and dignity, breast hunched over the scraps. There was a grace to her posture, a quiet strength that refused to be broken by age or hardship. He paused, surprised to see someone so small and frail in the open. "Why are you out here, woman?" he asked, his voice deep and rolling like distant thunder. She looked up at him, and for a moment the wind seemed to die down. Her eyes were a pale green, filled with memories of years he could not imagine. She did not flinch, nor did she speak immediately. Instead, she studied him with a calm curiosity, as if measuring the giant before her. "I am surviving," she said at last, her voice soft but steady, but nothing more. Ragnar frowned, unsure how to respond. Most people in the village would have screamed or run at the sight of him, but she remained. Her courage stirred something unfamiliar in him, a mix of admiration and something deeper, something he had not felt in a long time. "You could eat in the hall," he said, gesturing toward the village center. "You would not have to pick scraps from the ground." She shook her head. "The hall is not for me. I have no place there." Her words were quiet, but there was an unmistakable pride in them, a dignity that even his strength could not command. Ragnar studied her, wondering what tragedy or misfortune had brought her here. He had seen much in his life, yet something about her presence unsettled him. She was alone, yet unbroken, pale, weak, yet fearless. He had never met someone like her, and he was unsure whether he felt anger, curiosity, or longing. Round, he stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, and she did not flinch. "What is your name?" he asked, keeping his tone gentler than usual. "Elara," she replied.
"And yours?" "Ragnar," he said.
It felt strange to say his name aloud, almost like introducing himself not as a warrior, but as a man who had spent most of his life alone, with no one to see beyond the strength and fear he inspired. For a few moments they stood silently, The wind whistled around them, bending the trees, and the snow fell in thin, cold flakes. Yet in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Ragnar realized he wanted to know more about this woman, to understand how she survived in such a harsh world. Suddenly, the wind shifted, stronger and colder than before. Breaths rolled across the sky, and lightning flickered in the distance. The villagers would call it an omen, a warning of danger, but Ragnar did not move. He felt drawn to the change, as if the storm was alive, aware of their presence. Elara glanced toward the forest, her eyes narrowing. "It comes again," she murmured. "The curse, it stirs." Ragnar frowned. Breath. "Curse?" he asked, though the word was foreign to him. He had seen magic in the world, strange things in far-off lands, but curses were something even he approached with caution. She shook her head, turning back to the scraps at her feet. "Some things are old. Older than any of us. They wait, they watch, and they punish those who forget." Breath. Her voice carried a quiet sadness, as if speaking of a pain that never truly healed. Ragnar wanted to ask more, but before he could, a sudden crack echoed from the forest edge. A tree bent unnaturally, its trunk splitting under a force that was not wind. Elara froze, her hands trembling slightly, and Ragnar's instincts flared. He stepped in front of her, his massive frame a shield against whatever came. From the shadow of the trees, a chill seemed to rise, unnatural and heavy. The air grew thick, and the snow swirled in frantic spirals. For the first time, Ragnar felt fear, not for himself, but for the woman he had only just met. Then, as suddenly as it began, the movement stopped. The forest was still, the snow falling gently again. But Elara did not relax. Savish. She clutched a small pendant at her neck, a silver charm worn smooth by years of use. Her lips moved in a whisper, though Ragnar could not hear the words. "Who are you?" he asked again, quieter this time, feeling the tension in her presence and in the air. "I am someone who survives," she said finally, looking at him again. Her eyes glimmered with a strange light, reflecting the stormy sky above. "But not for long, if they come for me again." Ragnar did not fully understand, yet he nodded. For some reason he felt a bond forming, fragile, but undeniable. He had fought countless battles, faced creatures of legend, and survived betrayals that had broken lesser men, yet none of it had prepared him for the quiet courage of this elderly widow. He took a step back, allowing her space, but also signaling that he would not abandon her. "I will stay," he said. "Whatever comes, I will not leave you." Elara's lips curved into a faint smile, though sadness lingered in her eyes. "You do not know what you promise," she said softly. They remained in the cold silence, watching the forest edge as the clouds darkened overhead. The wind howled and the snow whipped around them, but they stood together, two figures from different worlds, drawn to one another by something neither could name. Then a sudden crash shook the ground beneath them. Elara's cottage, perched at the edge of the forest, trembled as if struck by an unseen hand. The windows rattled, the door swung open with a creak, and the small garden was scattered by the violent wind. Ragnar's heart pounded in his chest. "Stay behind me!" he roared, stepping closer to her. His hands clenched, ready for whatever force had dared disturb the fragile peace. Elara nodded, gripping her pendant tightly. "Is awake," she whispered. "The force my husband protected, it stirs again. You must be ready." Ragnar felt a shiver crawl up his spine. He had faced many foes, but none like this. Something ancient, something beyond sword and shield, had entered their world. And yet, despite the fear, he did not move away. Because for the first time in his life, he did not want to face it alone. As lightning split the sky, illuminating the trembling cottage, Ragnar and Elara stood together, their eyes locked on the dark forest where the storm seemed alive, waiting for them. Neither spoke, but in that silence they understood something important. Their lives were now intertwined, and the path ahead would test them both in ways neither could yet imagine. And somewhere deep within the shadows, something watched, patient and eternal, whispering promises of trials, power, and a bond that could either save them or destroy them. The storm that had shaken the village the night before left a strange calm behind. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind still whispered through the trees, carrying an icy chill that touched every corner of the village. The sun was hidden behind dark clouds, casting the world in a gray, muted light. Birds cautiously emerged from their nests, and the villagers slowly returned to their chores, though their eyes kept darting to the forest, as if expecting something to rise from its depths. Ragnar did not return to the village immediately. Instead, he followed the narrow path to the edge of the forest, where Elara's small trembling cottage stood. The door had been slightly torn from its hinges, and the walls showed faint cracks where the storm had battered them. But Elara was there, standing outside, her white hair blowing across her face. Her eyes were fixed on the forest, and a strange tension gripped her slender shoulders. "Ah, you came back," she said softly, almost as if she had expected him. "I said I would not leave you," Ragnar replied, his deep voice carrying over the cold air. "Whatever comes, I will face it." Elara looked at him, her green eyes thoughtful. "You are brave, or perhaps foolish," she said. "Most men would not dare to return after seeing what happened last night." Ragnar shrugged, though inside he felt the weight of unease. He had fought many battles, killed enemies larger than men, and faced creatures that would have terrified ordinary folk. Yet standing here with Elara, he realized there were powers in this world he could not control with sword or strength alone. Powers whispered in the wind and moved unseen through the trees. "Show me," he said simply. "Oh, show me what you fear!" Elara hesitated. Her hands twitched at the pendant around her neck, a silver charm worn smooth by decades of use. "It is not safe," she whispered. "The forest. It has been restless. My husband tried to keep it in check, but even he could not hold it forever." Ragnar's curiosity burned stronger than caution. "I have faced death many times," he said. "I have never turned from what I do not understand. Show me, Elara." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether he would survive the truth. Then, slowly, she gestured for him to follow. The path behind her led into the forest, narrow and winding. Brash. Snow still covered the ground, but the footprints of creatures long gone marked the trail. As they walked, Elara spoke quietly. "The curse is old, older than this village, older than the mountains themselves. My husband was its guardian, chosen to contain it, to prevent it from spilling into the world. But when he died, the balance broke, and now it stirs again." Ragnar nodded, listening. He was used to dealing with threats, but the words carried a weight that even he could not ignore. The forest grew darker as they went deeper, the trees bending and swaying in unnatural ways. Shadows seemed to stretch across the path, and the cold bit through his thick cloak. Yet, despite the fear, he felt a strange calm at being near Elara. Her courage was quiet, but it radiated like fire in the cold. After what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. Pool. In the center was a shallow pool, its surface still and black as night. Around it, the trees twisted unnaturally, their branches forming shapes that almost seemed alive. Lara knelt beside the water, her hands moving in careful patterns over its surface. Soft words left her lips, almost a song, though Ragnar could not understand them. The water began to ripple, and a faint glow appeared beneath the surface. Shadows rose from the edges, curling like smoke, forming shapes of animals, men, and strange creatures. Breath caught in his throat. He had seen illusions and magic before, but nothing like this. It was alive, watching, testing.
This is the Force,
Elara whispered. Run. It remembers. It tests those who approach, seeking weakness, fear, or greed. You must not falter. Ragnar stepped closer instinctively, his hand brushing hers. For a brief moment the chill vanished, replaced by warmth he had not felt in many years. Elara's eyes met his, and in that gaze he saw a mixture of fear and hope, strength and vulnerability. I will not falter, he said, though he felt the gravity of her words deep in his chest. Suddenly, the glow in the water intensified, and the shadows coalesced into a dark, almost human figure. Its eyes shone like coals, and its voice was a whisper carried on the wind. Who dares enter my domain? Elara flinched slightly, but Ragnar did not step back. I am Ragnar, he said firmly. I will not harm you, but I will protect this woman. He gestured toward Elara, who now stood beside him, her pendant glowing faintly. The figure seemed to study them, shifting and moving like smoke in the wind. Strength alone is meaningless, it whispered, and courage is but a fleeting flame. Ragnar's fists clenched. He had always relied on strength to survive, but here it felt useless. He turned to Elara. What do I do? He asked, his voice low. Elara reached out and took his hand. Desk. Joe. Deskas. We've got some problem. We cover up. That would be my problem. You must face it with heart, not sword. The shadow figure circled them, its voice rising and falling like the wind. You cannot control what is older than mountains. You cannot command what lives in the dark. Only those who accept can survive. Ragnar felt a strange heat in his chest, a mixture of fear and resolve. He thought of all the battles he had fought, all the enemies he had slain, and realized that nothing had taught him what he needed now. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and turned to Elara.
Together, he said simply.
We face it together. Elara nodded, her fingers tightening around his. She whispered words in the old language, and the glow of her pendant grew stronger, illuminating the clearing. The shadow figure stopped, tilting its head as if surprised by their unity. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a low hum, the shadows retreated into the pool, disappearing beneath the surface. The forest calmed, and the air seemed warmer, though the chill of the snow remained. Elara sank to her knees, exhausted. It tested us, she whispered. It will come again, stronger next time. Ragnar knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Then we will be ready, he said. Whatever comes, we face it together. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, something that made his heart pound. You are not like other men, she said softly. He glances around in despair. And you are not like other women, he replied. A faint smile touched her lips, and for a moment the weight of the forest, the storm, and the curse seemed to fade. They stayed in the clearing until the sun dipped low behind the clouds, casting long shadows across the snow. The forest seemed calm now, but both knew it was a fragile peace. The curse was ancient, patient, and it would not be defeated by courage alone. Breaths. As they walked back toward the village, side by side, Ragnar realized he had never felt such a connection with anyone. Ilara was more than a widow, more than a survivor. She was a force of her own, quiet but unyielding, and she had stirred something in him that no battle or victory ever had. When they reached the edge of the village, Ragnar noticed that the villagers had gathered in small groups, watching from a distance. Whispers followed them, words of fear, curiosity, and awe. They had seen the storm, and they had seen Ragnar's return, but none knew the true events of the forest clearing. Ragnar turned to Alara. "Do they frighten you?" he asked. She shook her head. "I have lived with fear all my life," she said. "The whispers of the living are easier to bear than the whispers of the dark."
He nodded, understanding in a way he had never expected.
Together, they walked to her cottage, the wind blowing through the snow-laden trees. The world felt heavy with history, with unseen forces and lingering curses. But they moved forward, stronger for the bond they had forged. As night fell, the forest around the village seemed to watch silently. Shadows shifted among the trees, and a low hum echoed, almost like a voice carried on the wind. Elora and Ragnar could feel it, though they could not see it. Something ancient and restless lingered, and it would not forget their courage. Belara entered her cottage, closing the door carefully behind her. Ragnar stayed outside for a moment, gazing at the dark forest. His mind raced with questions, fears, and a strange sense of purpose. He had fought many battles, but he knew this challenge was different. This was not a fight of strength, but of heart, trust, and understanding. Finally, he stepped back into the snow, his cloak heavy with frost, and whispered to the night, "Whatever comes, I will not leave her."
And somewhere deep within the forest, the darkness pulsed with awareness.
The curse had felt their courage, their unity, and it was awakening. Its patience was endless, and soon it would test them again. Harder, deeper, and in ways that neither Ragnar nor Alara could yet imagine. The days after the storm passed slowly, but the village did not return to peace. The air felt heavier, charged with a strange tension that the villagers could not explain. Livestock wandered nervously. Shadows seemed darker under the trees, and even the wind carried a whisper that sounded almost like voices. People whispered among themselves about the widow and the giant, warning one another not to go near her cottage. For some claimed that even Ragnar's return had brought trouble, and yet no one dared challenge him. Ragnar stayed close to Alara during these days, though he spent much of the time outside watching the forest and listening to the subtle changes in the wind. He had seen signs before, a broken branch here, a whisper of shadow there, but now he realized they were more than signs. They were warnings. The forest itself was restless, aware of every movement near Alara's home. Ilara moved quietly inside her small cottage, tending to her hearth and organizing the few supplies she had. Her hands were nimble, and every motion showed experience and care. Yet, despite her calm appearance, her eyes betrayed a worry she could not hide. She knew the curse had been disturbed. The shadows had tested them in the clearing, and while they had survived, the darkness was patient. It would return, stronger and more cunning than before. Ragnar entered the cottage one morning, shaking the snow from his cloak. "You have not slept well," he said gently. Ilara looked up, brushing a strand of white hair from her face. "I have slept enough to survive," she said softly. "But the curse does not rest. Neither should we." Ragnar knelt beside her, resting a hand on the worn wooden table. I do not understand it all, he admitted. But I do know one thing. I will not leave your side.
You do not face it alone.
Alara studied him, her green eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and sadness. You are different from any man I have known, she said quietly.
Most men see only strength, and they fear what they cannot control. You listen. Ragnar felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling unfamiliar and unwelcome in its intensity. He had fought for glory, for survival, and for honor, but never for this, never for the quiet courage of a woman who had seen the world break and yet remained standing. Their fragile peace was broken one evening when the village elders gathered at the center square. They had summoned Ragnar, demanding that he leave Alara alone. Whispers of curses, old magic, and omens had spread like wildfire, and the elders feared that the giant's involvement would only provoke the darkness further.
You must leave her, the eldest man said, his voice trembling.
She is cursed, and you, Ragnar, are bringing danger to all of us. The forest will not forgive interference.
Ragnar's fists clenched, but he remained calm. I will not leave her, he said firmly. I do not fear the forest, nor do I fear what comes from it. I will protect her whatever it takes. The villagers murmured in fear and awe. Some admired his courage, others whispered of folly. Alara watched silently from the doorway of her cottage, her hands gripping the pendant at her neck. I have tried to keep Ragnar at a distance, fearing the dangers he did not yet understand. But seeing him stand against the elders, unwavering, she felt a mixture of relief and worry. That night, as the village slept under a moonless sky, the forest began to stir again. Shadows crept along the ground, moving with purpose. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying a low, almost melodic whisper. Alara awoke to the sound, her heart pounding. Brown. She rose quietly, knowing that the force she had feared was awakening. Ragnar, who had slept near the hearth, rose at the same moment. It is here, she whispered, her voice tense. The curse is not dormant anymore. He nodded, feeling the familiar surge of determination. Then we face it, he said simply. Together they stepped outside. The snow had fallen lightly, creating a soft white blanket over the village, but the forest beyond was dark and menacing. Shadows moved among the trees, and the wind seemed to carry voices that twisted and turned, whispering secrets and doubts. Alara led Ragnar to a clearing near the edge of the forest. This time, the glow beneath the pool was stronger, more insistent. Shadows rose, forming shapes that twisted and writhed. The force was testing them again, probing for weaknesses, trying to turn fear into despair. Ragnar raised his hand, but Alara stopped him. Not with strength, she said. With understanding. With unity. He nodded, lowering his arm. He had always relied on strength, but here it would not help. For he focused instead on the rhythm of her voice, on the way she moved, and on the connection between them. The shadows circled them, whispering and shifting, their forms half human, half beast, twisted by centuries of malice. Alara began to chant softly, and the glow from her pendant spread across the clearing. Ragnar felt a warmth in the air, a quiet light that pushed back the shadows. Breath. He took her hand, and together they faced the darkness. The shadows lunged, but they did not strike with violence. Instead, they pressed against their minds, stirring memories of fear, loss, and regret. Ragnar felt visions of past battles, of friends lost, of enemies he had slain, all rushing at him with the force of guilt.
He faltered, shaking under the weight of the memories, and for a moment he thought he would break. Elara's hand squeezed his.
Do not let it control you, she whispered. Face it, but do not fight it with anger. Burst. Accept it, and it will pass. He drew a deep breath and closed his eyes. Instead of resisting, he let the memories wash over him without fear. He acknowledged them, felt them, and then let them go. A calm settled over him, and the shadows hesitated. Alara's chant grew stronger, her voice rising in confidence. The pendant glowed brighter, casting a warm light across the snow. Slowly, the shadows began to recede, drawn back toward the pool in the center of the clearing. The air grew lighter, the whispers fading into silence. For a moment, victory seemed theirs. Ragnar opened his eyes and looked at Elara. She was pale but smiling, exhausted but triumphant. "You did well," she said softly. He shook his head. "We did well. Together." But their moment of relief was short-lived. From the edge of the clearing, a deep, resonant voice echoed, low and rumbling. "You think this ends here?" The ground trembled beneath their feet. Shadows shifted, even as the light tried to push them back. A figure began to rise from the pool, larger than anything they had seen before. Its form was dark and shifting, with eyes like burning embers. The forest itself seemed to bend toward it, and the wind carried its voice like thunder. Ragnar stepped in front of Elara, placing himself between her and the figure. "What are you?" he demanded. The figure's voice was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "I am the guardian of what was forgotten. I am the force that tests those who dare disturb the balance. You have seen me, and now you are part of the game." Elara gripped Ragnar's hand tightly, her green eyes wide but determined. "We will not falter," she said. "Whatever you are, we face it together." The figure paused, as if considering their words. Then, with a sudden movement, the ground shook violently, and the figure's form expanded, towering over them. Shadows spilled across the clearing, curling like living smoke. The snow swirled in chaotic patterns, and a cold so deep it burned their skin swept over them. Ragnar felt a surge of fear he had never experienced. This was not a battle he could fight with strength. Yet he stood firm, hand in hand with Elara, feeling the warmth of her presence, the quiet courage that had drawn him to her from the beginning. For the first time he realized that power was not only in muscle or weapon, but in heart, trust, and unity. And if they were to survive, they would need all three. Elara stepped forward, chanting again. The pendant glowed with a light so bright it pierced the darkness, writhed, but did not touch them. Ragnar closed his eyes and focused, letting the light of Elara's courage flow through him. Vibration. Together they became a single force, a shield against the darkness. The figure let out a low roar, echoing through the forest, and then retreated slightly, almost as if acknowledging their strength. But the presence remained, waiting, patient, and eternal. Elara sank to her knees, breathing heavily. "It has tested us," she whispered, "but it will return. Next time, it will not be content to watch. It will strike." Ragnar knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder.
"Then we prepare," he said simply. "We will face it together."
Always. They returned to the village in silence, the snow crunching under their feet. The villagers had noticed the glow from the forest clearing and had whispered among themselves, afraid but curious. They dared not approach, yet they could not ignore the giant and the widow who had emerged victorious from the forest. That night, as Elara tended the hearth, Ragnar sat by the door, staring at the dark trees. He had faced death many times, but he knew this was only the beginning. The curse was patient, ancient, and cunning. It had tested them, and it had learned their strength. The next challenge would be harder, and neither of them could face it alone. Elara moved beside him, her hand brushing his. "You are different," she said softly. You do not seek glory. You seek understanding. That is why we survived. Brave. Ragnar smiled faintly, though his mind was heavy. And we will survive again, he said. Breaths. Whatever comes. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a voice that was both terrifying and familiar. They have faced me, but they are not ready. The game is only beginning. Breath. The wind howled across the village, carrying a bitter chill from the forest beyond. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending and twisting in ways that made the villagers uneasy. The animals huddled in barns and stables, sensing the change, while even the bravest villagers hesitated in their homes. Elara stood at the edge of her cottage, staring into the dark line of trees. Her pendant glowed faintly against her chest, pulsing with a rhythm she could feel in her bones. Ragnar stood beside her, his broad frame shielding her from the biting wind. The snow swirled around them, dancing in spirals like living spirits, yet neither moved. Their eyes were fixed on the forest, where the shadows stirred with an unnatural intelligence. It's coming, Elara whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. The force has awakened fully. This time it will not test us. It will strike. Ragnar's jaw tightened. He had faced death many times, yet something about this made his heart pound with a fear he could not name. He was used to fighting enemies he could see, strike, and conquer. But this force was different. It was ancient, patient, and aware, and its power far exceeded anything he had known. Whatever it is, he said firmly, we face it together. We will not run, and we will not fear. Not now, not ever. Elara placed a hand on his arm, feeling the strength radiate from him. Breath. I trust you, she said softly. But strength alone will not save us. The curse, it feeds on anger, fear, and pride. We must face it with heart, with unity, and with understanding. Ragnar nodded, though he knew this challenge would demand everything he had, and more. They stepped into the forest, the snow crunching beneath their boots, shadows curled around their feet, flickering like black smoke. The deeper they went, the darker the trees became, their branches forming twisted arches above, blocking the dim light of the gray sky. In the clearing where they had faced the shadows before, the force had grown. The pool was no longer calm. It swirled violently, glowing with an eerie green light. From its depths a figure rose, taller and broader than any man, its form shifting constantly, neither fully solid nor fully shadow. Its eyes burned like coals, and the air around it seemed to vibrate with its presence. You dare return? The voice rumbled, echoing in the clearing. You think you can stand against me? Ragnar stepped forward without hesitation. We are not afraid, he said, his voice steady, carrying across the snow and trees. We face you together. Elara stepped beside him, her pendant glowing brighter, casting a warm light that pushed back the shadows. We will not falter, she said. Your darkness does not frighten us. The figure let out a low, chilling laugh. Brave, but foolish. You think your courage is enough. You are weak, and I will show you how powerless you truly are. Shadows surged from the figure, twisting and writhing, reaching for them with long, dark tendrils. Ragnar raised his arms instinctively, preparing to strike, but Elara placed her hand on his chest. Not with violence, she said firmly. With unity. Feel the strength of your heart, the bond between us. Let it guide you. Ragnar hesitated, then closed his eyes. He felt the warmth of Elara's hand, the quiet courage in her eyes, the trust that had grown between them. Memories of battles, loss, and pain rose in his mind, but instead of fear, he felt clarity. He was not alone. He was not fighting for glory or honor. He was fighting for her, for them, and for the fragile balance between light and shadow. He opened his eyes, meeting the gaze of the shadowy figure. "I do not fight alone," he said. "Together we are stronger than fear, stronger than darkness." Elara began to chant softly, words in the old language her husband had taught her. The pendant glowed brighter, sending beams of light across the clearing. The shadows recoiled, their forms twisting as if in pain. Ragnar felt the warmth of her power flow into him, filling him with courage and clarity. Together, they were no longer just two people. They were a single force, unyielding, resolute, and alive with determination. The shadow figure roared, shaking the ground. Its tendrils lashed out, but each strike was met by a radiant barrier of light, emanating from Alara's pendant and Ragnar's unwavering heart. The force tested them relentlessly, probing for weakness, for fear, for doubt, but none could be found. Hours seemed to pass as they stood in the clearing, the snow swirling around them, the wind howling through the trees. The shadow figure shifted constantly, attempting to overwhelm them, yet they remained steadfast. Ragnar realized something profound. True strength was not in the sword, nor in brute force, but in unity, trust, and love. And in that realization, the shadows began to falter. Elara's voice rose higher, her chant echoing across the forest. The pendant glowed brighter still, casting a golden light that reached into the darkness, pushing the shadows toward the pool. The figure's voice trembled, shifting from rage to something almost hesitant. You are not weak," it whispered. "You are strong. Together." Ragnar and Elara exchanged a glance, understanding passing silently between them. The darkness was powerful, but it respected courage, heart, and unity. They did not need to destroy it. They only needed to face it, accept it, and choose to stand together. With a final resonant hum, the shadows withdrew into the pool. The air calmed, the wind softened, and the snow fell gently once more. The clearing was silent, peaceful, and for the first time the forest seemed almost alive in harmony rather than menace. Elara sank to her knees, exhausted but smiling faintly. "We did it," she whispered. Ragnar knelt beside her, his massive hand covering hers. "No," he said softly. "We did it together, and we are not finished. The curse will always be a part of this forest, but we have learned how to face it, and we will survive, together." Alara's eyes glistened with tears, not of fear, but of relief and gratitude. I never thought I would find someone like you," she said quietly. Breath. Someone who would not fear me, who would stand by my side when the darkness rose. Ragnar smiled, a rare and gentle expression on his rugged face. "And I never thought I would find someone like you." Brave. Strong, brave, and unyielding, even in the face of what I cannot understand. For a long moment, they sat together, the snow swirling around them, the forest calm. The storm had passed, the shadows had retreated, and the village below lay quiet under the pale moonlight. Yet in their hearts, both knew that life would never be simple again. The darkness was patient, ancient, and eternal. But so was their courage, their bond, and the strength they drew from one another. As they walked back toward the village hand in hand, the villagers watched from a distance. Whispers of awe and fear spread among them. Some believed the widow was cursed. Some believed the giant was unstoppable. But all saw the truth. The two of them together were more than legend. They were a force of light in a world that often seemed ruled by shadows. Back at the cottage, Elara tended the hearth, while Ragnar stood at the door, gazing into the dark forest. Do you think it will return? He asked quietly. Elara shook her head slowly, though a small smile touched her lips. Perhaps. But we are no longer afraid. Together we can face whatever comes. We have learned that courage, heart, and trust are stronger than fear, stronger than darkness. Ragnar nodded. He had faced many enemies in his life, but none had taught him what he had learned tonight. Breath. Strength alone was meaningless. What mattered was courage, understanding, and the bond that had grown between him and Elara. Brent. They stood together for a moment, listening to the wind whisper through the trees, feeling the snow lightly touch their faces. In the distance, the forest seemed calm, almost respectful, as if acknowledging their victory. Elara finally looked at Ragnar, her green eyes filled with warmth. "You have changed me," she said softly. "Not by fighting, but by standing with me, by trusting me, by facing the darkness together." "Fred, and you have changed me," he replied. "Not by magic, but by showing me that strength alone is not enough, that courage, love, and unity are stronger than any force in this world." They shared a quiet smile, their hands still intertwined. The snow fell gently around them, the village sleeping below, and the forest calm above. For the first time in a long while, both felt something they had not thought possible: peace. And though the darkness still lingered beyond the trees, patient and eternal, Ragnar and Elara knew one truth: together they could face it all. The curse could test them again. The shadows could rise and storms could come, but they would endure. Not alone, not afraid, and not broken. Above the village, the moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting silver light across the snow. The forest seemed to sigh, and a gentle glow radiated from Elara's pendant. The night was calm, the wind was soft, and the bond between the giant Viking and the widow had become something stronger than legend. For the first time, the village, the forest, and the world beyond felt the beginning of a new story. And as Ragnar and Elara stood together silhouetted against the moonlight, it was clear that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. The curse had awakened, tested, and recognized them. But in the end, it had revealed something far greater: the power of heart, unity, and unwavering courage. And so, in the quiet of the snowy night, the giant Viking and the widow began a new chapter of their lives, forever bound by trust, respect, and the love that had grown stronger than any darkness the world could offer.